In past videos, we've been testing the functionality of our applications by hand. We've been doing what's called user testing, which means having a user actually go through, use the application, and test things to make sure there's no errors. Now, don't get me wrong, there's actually no replacement for user testing because automated systems are not going to catch some of the things a keen observer, primarily one who's really good at QA, is going to catch. As with all things technology, there is so much that we can automate in order to save ourselves time and catch bugs before our code even gets to user testing, let alone production. YOLO deploying untested code on Fridays. So there's three main types of testing that we're going to focus on in Flutter development. The first is the unit test, and which is what we're going to be talking about today. The unit test is where you take the smallest bits of code, think individual functions and methods, and you make sure that your code can test them individually and in an automated fashion. The second type is a component test, which is a higher level testing methodology. So instead of testing the smallest units, you're going to test an entire component. Think of this as testing a screen on an app, or perhaps a widget. This usually is going to require some more automation and a more advanced testing suite. We're going to talk about this later. For now, just know it's a higher level. The third type of testing we're going to deal with eventually is end-to-end test, which basically means testing the entire functionality of the application. Now, there's two ways you're probably going to do this. The first is actually user testing, having users, real humans who have a script of things they need to test, going through and testing everything and looking for something bizarre. The second would be having a simulated environment such as a virtual machine and having software or an application that runs through and tests the most common scenarios of your application. This can be very handy, but for a small team, it might be prohibitive to set up. Obviously, since we're making smaller applications, we're focusing on unit testing. Now, as I mentioned, testing, especially unit testing in Dart, is so simple. The Dart team has developed a package called test. Now, there's two ways you're going to install this. The first way is if you used the Dart create or Flutter create command in your application, the testing library will have been pre-installed for you. In fact, you're even going to have the folder and structure setup you need. If you created your own Dart application, you are merely going to have to install it on your own, and I'm going to show you how to very briefly. So to install this on your own, you're going to need to go to pub.dev/packages/test or search for test. You're going to go to the installation tab, and as you can see, with Dart, you're going to run dart pub add test --dev, or alternatively, if you're working on a Flutter application right now, you'll execute this command. Running that command will automatically add it to your pubspec.yaml file. It's also going to run dart pub-get, which is going to handle fetching and installing the package for you. If you want to use the dart create command, you can do so like this. Simply type dart create and then the package name. We're going to call this testing suite test. A very elegant name, I know. And you're going to notice it's creating the testing suite, it's running pub-get, and it's all created. So we're going to exit out of our command line, and we're going to open this folder inside of our IDE and see what we can see. So notice inside of our IDE, we have a pubspec YAML with our test and linter already built in. So you can see that this is installed, but you might be asking yourself, what are the bin, lib, and test folders? Well, if you're familiar with Linux or other shell-based operating systems, you're going to know that bin usually means executable. So in this case, the bin Dart file is going to be the main function that's going to execute your application. The lib, or short for library, is going to be the functions or methods that are used in creating your application. So most of your code is going to live here. And the test is where your test suite is going to live. So take a note of something here. Instead of typing out Dart and then the file name, when we use Dart create and use this bin structure, we can actually just type Dart run to execute our application. So you can see it's a really useful application that just prints hello world and then calculates a number. You'll see this calculate function just returns 6 times 7. This is merely for testing purposes. But here's the exciting thing. Let's go to our test folder. You can see there's a void main test inside of here. And please note we have imported the test package. Then you're going to notice a function called test, and it's called calculate. And inside of this function, as an argument, we're passing another function and then using this function called expect. So basically what expect does is it tells Dart to run this calculate function, and then it's expecting to get 42 in return. So as I'm sure you know, 6 times 7 is 42. If you didn't know that, you might want to practice your math facts. So how do we execute these tests? Well, let's go ahead and run Dart test. Take a look. It's going to build our package executable, which can take a second. Don't worry about that. And then you're going to notice it says built test test. All tests passed. That's great. That means we know our calculate function is returning the expected feedback and we don't have to individually test it. This is especially great if we made a ton of changes to our code. Now let's go ahead and in our test, we know 6 times 7 is 42, but let's just type out this extremely large number and see what happens when we run Dart test. Ooh, some tests failed. So you're going to notice it says we were expecting a 9 trillion whatever, and the actual result was 42. So we didn't pass our test. Think about how useful this is going to be for your testing, especially in our weather application. So let's go ahead and set this back, run our test one more time. All right, it passes again. I hope you're understanding how tests work to some degree. That calculator example was very simple, but it should give you the idea that what we're doing is we're executing a method and we're looking for our expected return. If we don't get the expected return, we can assume something is wrong and we're going to return an error to whoever is running our test suite. So we don't have to set up all of our testing manually. We're actually going to create a new weather app project and import all of our old code. So let's see how we do this. We're going to use the Dart create command. So I've gone ahead and used the command Dart create weather app unit tests. And you can see it's building the project for us. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to open up this application in our IDE. So we have our IDE open, we have our test folder, our lib folder, and our bin folder. You're going to need to import all the previous functions and code we've done into this project. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, so we have our old weather app here. We're going to just want to take our config, utilities, and weather file as it is, and we're just going to copy and paste them over into the lib folder in our new project. So you can see we've got conf, utilities, and weather 4. Now we're going to notice that we're actually missing some packages here. So it looks like since we've ported this over, we're missing a few packages. So we're going to import our international package, dartpub add intl. We're going to let that run. Dartpub add http. Great. We've got this code as well. You can see dartpub get is running. All right, we've eliminated all of our errors there. Remember I said the bin folder is where your executable code goes? Well, I would say this is actually the executable function here. This entire void main sync area we have here. This is the program we want to run. So I think we should just copy and paste all of our code from weather 4 into our test project here. Let's try Dart run and see if it works. Dart run, building package executable. Oh, yay. Oh, good. Everything seems to work. So this is just being treated as the executable when you do Dart run. Now inside of here, we've got our lib and config file, and we've also got a file called unit app test start. We actually do not need this. Let's just go ahead and delete that. So then we have to go to our test suite and we have to make sure we're importing our weather application. We can see here we have, weather app unit test weather4.dart. So we're just going to use that file. You can name it whatever you want. I just want to showcase to you that we need this. We're going to temporarily comment out this test for calculate because we don't really need it anymore. So don't worry too much about this setup. All we've really done is import our old weather code into this app. So now that we can use tests. What should we test? I'm noticing that the smallest options we have here is zip code valid format, things like this. So why don't we test is zip code format valid? This is one of the more important parts of our application. So let's go ahead and go to our unit tests. And let's make a unit test called is zip code valid. Notice we had to import our utilities library here. So how does this is zip code valid function work? It passes in a string called zip code. Let's go ahead, we're gonna run the function, and then we're gonna pass in a zip code of, what should we say? Let's use my zip code, 80528. And the expected value, since we do know it's valid, is true. So let's run Dart test and see what's gonna happen here. It looks like our unit tests passed. Now how else can we test to see if this is zip code valid function works? What if instead we pass a really long number that we know is not a zip code, and say we're expecting false? Then let's run Dart test again. All tests passed, great. So what else could we expect? We know that we want to support 9-digit zip codes. So let's go ahead, we're gonna expect true since 9 digits is valid. We're gonna do Dart test, all tests passed. That looks great. Let's just go ahead and we're gonna assume that if we put a bunch of letters in, it's gonna be false. Let's test that scenario. Wonderful. So I hope you're beginning to see the power of the testing format here. We can run as many different variations of test is zip code valid as we want to make sure any and every scenario we can think of is represented. Let's try a 1-digit number. That should return false. What about if we decide we want to test the getDayOfWeekName method? We're going to create a test called doesDateWork. And then we're going to expect, we're going to put our function name in here with a string of day, and we're going to do something that we expect is going to come back as Tuesday. March 7th, 2023 is a Tuesday. Let's pass 2023, 03, 07. Now let's run Dart test. Amazing, it actually works. Let's go ahead and break this. Let's just put the 8th here. Well, this is amazing, look. Expected Tuesday, actual Wednesday. So we can see it's in our doesDateWork test. We can see we expected Tuesday but received Wednesday, which is different. This is an amazing test, so let's go ahead and set it back. Let's run another test just to be safe. So we're going to expect that the 8th would be Wednesday. Let's test it one more time. Fantastic, this works. Do you begin to see the power of testing? We could run as many tests as we want in here to make sure our application is working. So let's do a quick review of what we've learned in this lesson. First of all, we learned how to use Dart create to create an application that has all of this stuff built in and has this nice little folder structure here. Second, we imported our old functionality into the bin and lib folders. So basically everything but the executable section went in lib, and the part that's actually executing, which was our old void main sync, ended up in the bin folder. Everything else in lib. And then we created some unit tests. So for our unit tests, we checked to see if the zip code is valid. We passed in a whole bunch of scenarios, putting in data and getting the expected response. And if we don't get what we expect, it triggers an error. And we also test, does our date function work, to make sure we're getting Tuesday and Wednesday back. And as you get better at this, you're probably going to end up creating these tests alongside your actual code. It might feel like it's taking slightly longer, but this exercise of knowing that you need to test things and architecting it in this way is actually going to make you a better developer. It's going to allow you to set up your applications better. And most importantly, as you make changes, especially if other people are working on the code, you're going to be able to run Dart test and see if anything is broken. Now, this isn't necessarily the only way you're going to need to test, especially as you get into large-scale applications, as we mentioned before. But for now, this is going to be a huge help to you. So my name is Jeff Booth, and I want to thank you so very much for coming and watching these videos. It means a lot to me. I know that we have a lot of work to do to improve our channel. So can you please find it in your heart to give us a thumbs up, maybe click subscribe? And if there's anything you want to see, whether it's improvements in how we teach, whether you don't like our ugly background, whether there's lesson subjects you'd like to see, let me know. I'd be more than happy to cover things. And if I don't know how to do it, I will learn in order to help you learn. Thank you so very much for joining us. Au revoir. We will see you in the next video.